Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
By putting this out there, that it'll be something that can be scaled and replicated across our coast and in coastal environments around the country.
A new tool for living in Louisiana.
I've always had a passion for education.
And at 19, he's the state's youngest school board member.
I kind of immersed myself in Louisiana culture.
A native son on his musical journey to a world stage.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andre Morrow. Natasha Williams is off tonight. We'll have much more on those top stories in a moment on this week's edition of SWI. But first, Governor John Bel Edwards says it's more likely than not that the Morganza spillway will be open because of the Mississippi River's record high water levels, a decision to be made in the coming days. The spillway has been opened only twice before since it was built back in 1954. Now we'll look at some of the other stories making headlines across the state.
Governor John Bel Edwards is asking the president for a federal disaster declaration following devastating tornadoes. The declaration is for Lincoln, Morehouse, and Union parishes. The late April twisters killed 2 people and left more than $12 million damage, especially impacting Louisiana Tech University and the city of Ruston. The governor also toured high wind damage in Ville Platte, where at least 50 homes and businesses were destroyed. This year's widespread and long-lasting flooding has made it likely that a big, oxygen-starved dead zone will form off the Louisiana coast this summer. Ocean science leaders say early computer models indicate a large to very large year for the area where there is too little oxygen to support all marine life. Significant amounts of widely used fertilizers have run from farmland into waterways in the 31 states that feed the Mississippi River, and ultimately that flow is into the Gulf of Mexico. High water is meaning an early summer vacation for some students in Assumption Parish, those at Fiere Elementary. School officials say this past Tuesday was their last school day of the year. Roughly 550 students, pre-K to 8th grade, are involved. The school is in a low-lying area where continued high water on the Mississippi and Atchafalaya rivers has caused backwater flooding in the Lake Verret Basin. For the second time in recent years, the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, CPRA, has been named a national winner for Best Restored Beaches from the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association. CPRA's Caminata Headland Beach and Dune Restoration Project restored more than 13 miles of beach and dune stretching from below Port Fourchon in Lafourche Parish eastward to the end of Elmer's Island in Jefferson Parish. CPRA continues to head up the biggest single ecosystem restoration project the state has ever undertaken. The state's Child Welfare Agency is launching a new recruitment campaign searching for potential foster parents willing to care for teenagers. The Department of Children and Family Services says teens account for about 20% of the children under the state's oversight, but fewer than 5% of non-relative foster homes are taking in teenagers.
The session is heading into the final couple of weeks now at the Capitol. Here's a look at some of the highlights and the action from this week.
Lawmakers this week took another step toward chipping away at abortion rights, a step closer to passing a bill that would ask voters to rewrite the state constitution and ban abortion protections. The constitutional change is one of several anti-abortion measures proposed this session. A bill is also nearing final passage that could ban the procedure as early as 6 weeks of pregnancy. Saying he doesn't have the votes, a New Orleans senator scrapped his latest bid to raise the state's minimum wage. Democratic Senator Troy Carter had proposed to set our minimum wage at $9 an hour, up from the $7.25 federal level. Said Carter, "Shame on us if we continue to let this be our legacy." It is the fourth year of defeat for an effort backed by the governor. A bid to legalize sports betting in the state edged forward. It won support of a committee filled with a number of anti-gambling lawmakers. More hurdles remain, though, on the bill that would allow wagering on college and pro sports at state casinos and racetracks. House Republicans are pushing ahead with a plan to undo the 7-year sales tax passed last year to stabilize state finances. The House Appropriations Committee voted to advance the bill to phase out the almost half-penny tax over 4 years, or by mid-2023. The House agreed unanimously to boost the amount the state pays parish sheriffs for housing state inmates in local jails. The increase would eventually cost about $30 million a year. It now goes to the Senate for debate. No debate again for a proposed gas tax hike. Baton Rouge Representative Steve Carter shelved his bid to raise the state gas tax to pay for road projects, saying it's too late to work House Bill 542 through the legislative process. He did issue a challenge to the next governor, saying after the fall elections, the governor should call a special session to address our D-rated infrastructure.
Louisiana is the most flood-prone state in the U.S., but the state is being proactive to stay dry, and it's doing that with a new set of policy recommendations. We know the Coastal Master Plan, that's in place, but now LaSafe, which stands for Louisiana's Strategic Adaptations for Future Environments, gives us what's being called maybe a more down-to-earth approach. Pat Forbes is Executive Director of the Office of Community Development, which oversees this, and Matt Sanders is one of the lead writers, program managers for LA Safe. So what are you telling people?
What the LA Safe plan says is that while structural protection measures and coastal restoration are all ongoing and planned for the coast, there are other things we can do and need to do to adapt to this continued land loss that Louisiana is suffering.
We have a lot of good information from the Coastal Master Plan that helps us understand our current risk and what we think our future risk will look like. And those are vital tool sets for us to think about the future of our communities and where and how we build now and into the future.
This plan is giving a real acknowledgement to climate change, that being real, and that's part of our new reality and our future. And it also comes on the heels of almost 15 years of really storms hitting the state in a way where they never have before, from Katrina to other tropical systems to the floods of 2016.
The LA Safe Plan is not the first to acknowledge global climate change. Certainly that's acknowledged by the state's Coastal Master Plan. Matt was talking earlier about how we relied on modeling from that plan that predicts relative sea level rise for 50 years into the future. And so that's sort of what our plan is based on, is looking at those future risks, knowing that they are increasing.
And that life is changing. It will not be the same as it was. There may not be as much land, and that the water might be higher around it. You've started out with 6 parishes that a grant has allowed you to go in and adapt plans for those parishes, Matt?
The parishes themselves were all parishes that were heavily impacted by Hurricane Isaac in 2012, which is where the grant source came from. But we think that they were really good parishes for us to work in. Collectively, they represent about 8.5% of all payouts from the National Flood Insurance Program from the life of the program to present day. And so it was a good place to start. And I think, you know, when you talk about something like climate change and you get on the ground and you talk to people that have seen changes happen for the duration of their lives, it's not a concept that is lost on the people that have been living in these places for as long as they have been.
Is there anywhere in this plan that you're suggesting to people that they may have to move in the future?
Sure. It acknowledges that there are places along the coast that the 50-year risk is so high that it's unlikely that community is going to be viable. I mean, we have an example now paid for through this same grant, the resettlement of the community of Ile-de-Jean-Charles in southern Terrebonne Parish. And we're moving the whole community about 40 miles north to get them to a safe, high, dry place.
So there could be others.
We're hoping that by putting this out there that it'll be something that can be scaled and replicated across our coast and in coastal environments around the country.
People want to check a website to see all about it. Where do they go?
lasafe.la.gov.
lasafe.la.gov. Guys, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
While Louisiana has been promised $1.2 billion from the federal government to fund a statewide plan of flood mitigation projects, 15 months have passed and it hasn't received a dollar. Why that is was just one of the topics covered in this month's Louisiana Public Square episode about how the state is addressing the effects of climate change.
We have a series of monitoring stations, almost 400 stations across the coast that are monitoring relative subsidence rates. We also have some targeted research efforts, if you will, to investigate the way faults are affecting subsidence, for example, that was mentioned, I know, earlier, and a subsidence superstation, for example, that's being installed in Plaquemines Parish. So there is a lot of work. We do recognize that that's an area that we need to improve on, and I mentioned that in my sort of grade assessment as well, that there's always room for improvement.
The planning that the state is putting together now to try to preserve cultures and have this more thoughtful approach to migration and movement of people makes a lot of sense, because these episodes of dramatic land loss, 216 miles overnight, square miles lost during Hurricane Katrina, and then Rita right after that, you know, those storms are growing more intense. Since 1980, the landfalling hurricanes from the Atlantic Basin have increased in virtually all measures of intensity.
The majority of the funding for the Coastal Master Plan is coming from the oil and gas industry in some form, whether it's from the BP settlement or from GOMESA, the sale of offshore leases. And then there are these coastal parish lawsuits against the oil and gas companies that could provide not probably a very substantial amount of money, but you know, they're symbolic in a sense. And you know, are there other ways that we could look to the oil and gas industry to, you know, make right for the canals that they've carved in the marshes over time that have contributed, by some accounts, you know, to up to 70% of the land loss?
Some 51% of our state is in a special flood hazard area. The geography of our state is in a special flood hazard area. So the cost of insurance is going to determine where people live. It's going to determine what people are in vulnerable positions whenever we do have storms and disasters. And it's critical to how we address the issue, because if we continue to have people live in places that we know are dangerous, and we don't discourage that, and we don't make it possible, we don't facilitate people's ability to live in safer places, then we're setting ourselves up for having our most vulnerable populations living in our most dangerous places.
That full program, Sinking Cities, airs on Sunday at 11 a.m. and next Tuesday at 10 p.m. There's one school board member in particular in Avoyelles Parish who can really relate to students and how they feel about school. The reason Stanley Celestine Jr. is so in step with the kids in his district is because just 2 years ago, well, he was a student himself, a senior at Louisiana School for the Agricultural Sciences in Bunkie. Then last November, in a rout, Celestine won a seat on the parish school board. He's now 19, and he believes he's in a good position to help the parish improve on its C grade. Natasha Williams reports.
Stanley Celestine Jr. is anything but your typical 19-year-old.
I've always had a passion for education.
The Avoyelles Parish native says that interest was sparked when he was still in grade school.
In 7th grade, my 7th grade English teacher kind of introduced us to education policy making, some of the inequities that exist in education, not just in Avoyelles Parish, but across the United States.
Late last year, Celestine took that passion to another level.
Now that I serve on the school board, I'm able to do that, but in a more official capacity. And now I'm able to leverage the voices and opinions of not just students, but also their parents and other stakeholders of our school system.
In November, Stanley Celestine Jr. was elected to the Avoyelles Parish School Board, getting 65% of the vote. He is currently the youngest elected school board member in the state and the youngest ever elected in Avoyelles Parish.
One of the things that helped me with my campaign was my prior engagement with the school system. So some people, it was like, it's just a natural fit.
So your family, did your family have any doubts about you doing this process? I mean, did you sit down with your mom and dad and say, hey, I want to run for school board? And they're like, what?
Yes, so running for school board had been in the works for about 2 years. And my mom and dad just thought that once I would start college, it would, pretty much that thought would go away. And I remember the day I qualified, I think I maybe told one of them, and so they hadn't had time to communicate with one another. But once I did it, they were in support.
Celestine says he's prepared to serve.
Even when I was in high school, I found opportunities to engage with my local school board, attend meetings, voice my concerns about issues, and really represent a student voice. My campaign slogan was stand for kids.
Now, as an official voice, he has jumped right in to take a stand for kids and is moving ahead with many of the issues he ran on, things he says parents and grandparents have told him that need improvement in their children's schools.
My 4-year plan is just to ensure that students' voice is embedded into not just our local schools, but also on the district level as well, to ensure that we are a thriving school system, not just financially, but also in just the perception of our school system, and just really creating a school system that is innovative and that is pushing the edge in terms of the offerings and programs that we provide to students that will allow them to reach their full potential.
The district currently has a C grade, up from a D grade, so you've made some progress, I guess, in recent years. But what will you do to move the needle? I mean, to help these schools get to the next level to become a B school and hopefully ultimately an A school?
The first thing in order to do that is really getting an understanding of how schools are measured with school performance scores and the formula that is used. And once you're able to get an understanding, you are able to look at different areas that factored into that performance. For me, it's taking a look at all of those different factors and identifying areas where we can make improvements. But it also revolves around supporting our teachers, making sure that they have meaningful professional development, and also making sure that our parents understand some of the challenges that we're facing as a system and including them in the decision-making process.
Celestine says he expects he and the other 6 new board members to be challenged.
On us as a board being held accountable, not just with our constituents, but also not just the constituents that elected us, but also by students. We are here to service them. And so it's very important that there's accountability, not just at the board level, but also the district level and also at the local school level.
And his school board job isn't the only thing this ambitious teen is tackling. He's also a full-time college student at McNeese State University, who is 100% committed to making Avoyelles Parish schools among the best in the state.
Making our school system more innovative, just providing life-changing opportunities for our students.
Thank you, Natasha Williams, for that report. The Avoyelles Parish School Board recently approved a 4-day school week in hopes of attracting more certified teachers. Teachers in Avoyelles are currently the lowest paid educators in the entire state. When you think of the blues, names like B.B. King and Louisiana's own Buddy Guy come to mind, and another Pelican State bluesman, Chris Thomas King. Chris grew up in his dad's juke joint, Tabby's Blues Box, in Baton Rouge. It was there at Tabby's where his own unique style of blues guitar quickly garnered national attention. We have this report now from Will Lurker.
name is Chris Thomas King. I was born and raised as a young kid in Baton Rouge in my dad's blues club called Tabby's Blues Box. I put out my first album, I think, as a teen, and that took me, I moved to Europe. I made my way back to New Orleans, and ever since I made my way back, I kind of immersed myself in Louisiana culture.
Chris Thomas King, a Louisiana native blues artist most known for his musical and acting work on feature films Ray and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Well, I'm crawling through the grass, baby, when the grass is high.
King was introduced to the blues at a young age by his father, Tabby Thomas, who had already established a national reputation as a blues legend. Together, they embraced the blues in their world-renowned juke joint called Tabby's Blues Box.
My dad was something very, very special. He had some qualities that I could never dream of, inheriting. He just had a gift, for engaging people. He just left an impression on them. When I look back on those days, coming of age, in Tabby's Blues Box, which opened in 1979, I wouldn't trade it for the world now, because there's things that I learned there and things that I absorbed there that I couldn't get in any book or any secondhand way. So I got a lineage, to the roots of the blues and the roots of Louisiana music.
King became a nationally known figure after folklorists from the Smithsonian Institute discovered him in 1979. He subsequently went on to release several albums.
They began encouraging me and following me and writing to other folklorists and stuff that this guy, like Lead Belly, like Muddy Waters and other people represent something, that we should take a look at. And it turns out, looking back, I was the last, folk blues artist to be discovered by folklorists in the 20th century. So I'm kind of like the end of a long tradition that started with people like Lead Belly.
Many Americans believe that the genre of blues originated in Mississippi, but King firmly advocates that it originally came from Louisiana.
It's a Creole term. The word blue comes from old Protestant words like blue laws, no dancing here, no drinking, no mixed race dancing, no this, that, all these moralistic rules. And because Louisiana culture was, before the Americans came, was a Creole culture that, was more wide open than the British colonies. And that's what the blues came out of, pushing back against blue laws and these rigid tyranny of what you can and can't do. And it was a music that just kind of expressed itself.
Despite his upbringing in traditional classic blues, King wanted to expand upon from the conventions of his elders by incorporating modern musical elements into his music, such as the drum machine.
Like most young people, you grow up in a certain culture, but you're more curious about what's out there, what's out in the big wide world, as opposed to this farm you're growing up on or this family store. Well, we had a family juke joint, and I was curious about the wider world. I made my first hip-hop blues statement, 21st Century Blues from the Hood, in '93, and that record was the first rap blues statement.
King's first venture into the hip-hop world was well received overseas, but American audiences found difficulty in embracing his new musical style.
In my music lately, I've been running up against these, I call them blues mafia people, who want to maintain and can continue these tropes from the past.
King's most recent battle with the music industry comes with the Recording Academy's Grammy Awards, which recently removed his newest album, Hotel Voodoo, from consideration for the category of Best Contemporary Blues Album. The Academy's reason for removing the album was due to an unauthentic blues sound.
It's absurd. If we all have to paint with the same brush and paint the same picture and play the same notes, then what's the point in that? Muddy waters come and wash my blues away.
King is currently writing a memoir on the history of blues, entitled The Blues, the authentic narrative of my music and culture therewith.
It's a memoir, but it's a broader history of the music. And as far as I know, it's the first blues history book written by an African American. And that's part of the problem. You know, I used to be angry at people for not knowing the authentic story or the authentic history. But then again, if you don't tell people your story, if you don't put your story out there, how are they supposed to know?
That was Will Lurker reporting. This month in Los Angeles, King opened in the stage play Lackawanna Blues. Premiering on LPB and PBS June 6th, the anniversary of D-Day, is a battle from World War II that is relatively unexplored. The broadcast of Season Secure, the Battle for La Fiere, will shed light on it and its importance on securing a critical route inland for Allied forces invading France on that day in 1944. The fight for La Fiere Causeway and Bridge is regarded as one of the bloodiest small arms battles in U.S. military history, fought largely by paratroopers and glidermen from the 82nd Airborne Division.
If you ask American troops who were present at the Battle for La Fiere, June 7th is the one that's burned into their brain.
The Allied invasion on D-Day was a turning point in World War II. As forces landed on the beaches of Normandy, often overlooked battles fought by unsung heroes who dropped in advance behind enemy lines laid the groundwork for victory.
The fight at La Fiere Bridge is largely unknown. The average thoughtful, informed person has never heard of this battle.
This isn't just a great moment in the history of the U.S. Army. It's a moment, I think, that should make all Americans proud. La Fiere is a battle for the ages.
It was one of the bloodiest small unit actions of the war.
The La Fiere battle, it was more hand-to-hand, more one-on-one.
Fought over a small bridge on a critical artery for Allied forces.
How come he didn't kill us all, it's hard to explain.
Failure could have changed the outcome of the invasion.
General Ridgway showed up and said, Lindquist, I want that bridge, and I want it now.
There's no better place to die. We stay. And we stayed.
Victory or defeat in Normandy would be determined by the valor of men like those whose mission it was to seize and secure La Fiere.
This documentary, produced by LPB in association with the National World War II Museum, will premiere on PBS stations across the country. LPB will feature it at 8 p.m. on June 6th, which is the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And that's our show for this week, everyone. For all of us at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Morrow. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Support comes from
Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.